This clip is about the PEC pattern from the Postural Restoration Institute in Nebraska. PEC is the acronym for Posterior Exterior Chain Pattern. So it's the muscles on the surface of the body, on the back of the body. So calves, hamstrings, glutes, and rectus spinae muscles in particular. The Postural Restoration Institute has identified a series of patterns through the body. Pattern means it's polyarticular, or the problems people have is not necessarily just because of one muscle or a group of muscles, but a series of muscles running through the entire body. And that's based on how our neurology is wired in the brain, which affects hand dominance to a degree, and also the organ location. So the organs being asymmetrical in the body means that the two diaphragms have to be different sizes. So the right diaphragm is way bigger than the left, and the left is also flatter as well. This alters what the hip position is neurally in the body. This is largely not a visual thing. It's something that's found by testing, specific testing from the Postural Restoration Institute's training. So there's a left ARC pattern, which I've talked about in other posts, which is basically because of the diaphragm size differences and the organ location differences. The left pelvis lives forward this way here, and the right diaphragm has dominance where it starts to pull the rib cage back around, loses apposition here in this zone of apposition, and the head ultimately has this position here, and affects chains to do into the arms as well. So that's the left ARC pattern. There's a right ARC pattern, which is the total opposite. Our body should be able to move from left ARC to right ARC patterns. The problem that it gets stuck in the left and can't go into the right. So the postural restoration is aiming to make the body symmetrical when it's based off its own natural asymmetry. The PEC pattern is another step further, and I see people mainly in this pattern, and it's a pattern of stress in particular. So basically, if the body's living in this position here, over many years, the body starts to learn, I can't function here properly, I've got to do something to try to compensate. So the other hip also comes forward too. So what this does, what's sort of noticeable clinically, is that the person, maybe always in their life, hasn't been able to rotate very much. They can't rotate their head very well, especially can't rotate their torso, limited range of motion in their hips. And what it is, what's happening there, because the hip has had to come forward too, there's this massive anterior tilt in the pelvis. Because of the orientation of the acetabulums in the femoral heads, the femurs actually externally rotate, both of them like this. So if I showed it really obvious, there's this massive external rotation in the hips, rotated forward in the pelvis. It'd be weird for the body to live like this. So the exterior chain pattern through the back here opens out, it flares the ribs open. The sternal angle is quite big generally here. So this angle here coming up to the sternum is quite big. And the head often comes forward to try to balance things too. So these people have chronically tight calves, chronically tight hip flexors. Therapists, when they push on this lower back area into the, just below where the diaphragm attaches around T8 area, when they push, the person's body will always react. It's like there's this spasm all the time. To me, that's one of the signs this person's probably a PEC pattern. They have really tight rhomboids. There's always rhomboid issues because the body can't rotate very well. It can't even breathe properly very well. So the body uses the rhomboids and these muscles up along here to help expand the rib cage. The head comes forward. When the head comes forward, a lot of people think that the chin actually comes forward too, but because of its connection with the SEM muscle here and the connection into the pterygoids in the jaw here, as the head goes forward, the jaw actually sits back this way. So it has this drag where it gets pulled back. So there's jaw issues. There can be a lot of problems coming from the base of the skull. A lot of neural connections, really important neural connections come through that. So if you've got a really important area that should be in a neutral position, always stuck like this, the righting reflex makes the eyes level. Otherwise we'll be walking around like this. So the pattern, if I make it really obvious again, legs externally rotated, hip forward, back open, and head forward. This is the pattern. And of course people don't come in looking like this, but when we test, the body's showing that that's the pattern that it's always in. So how we get rid of that is actually quite easy. There's exercises to do it. A lot of internal rotation in the legs, with your legs up against the wall, breathing comfortably into the pelvis. This helps all the muscles in the pelvic floor to go to an optimal position. Because when the muscles in the pelvic floor, there's two diaphragms in the pelvic floor, there's two diaphragms in the breathing apparatus up here. When the body's in this position, those diaphragms don't work anywhere near as adequately as they can. They can't make intra-abdominal pressure very well at all. There can be possibly pelvic floor issues. So as soon as we get things where the body goes back more to center and finds a neutral position where this can actually be used properly. People with chronic neck tension is one of the indicators I tend to find with the PEC pattern. Chronic neck tension, it starts to disappear. And it's chronic neck tension in people who have no injuries in their neck. So internal rotation helps the pelvis to release all the pelvic floor muscles, helps the pelvis, the thorax to become more in alignment, and it helps air get into the back. One other sign I notice with PEC people is they generally have this really flat thoracic spine. So we want to be able to get air into the thoracic spine so it's not so much busting through the front here all the time, because the body can't use down here very well, so it has to breathe up here and uses the scalene muscles to essentially every breath. So no wonder this gets tight here. So that's the lower body, a lot of internal rotation, pelvic orientation positions, and a lot of reaching forward, whether it's on all fours or against the wall or hanging on to things, and breathing with this kind of sound, because it makes the internal obliques contract and pulls the ribs that are always living open like this, pulls them into a position where they can actually start to function properly with the diaphragm, and the intercostal muscles can relax too. Tight pecs is another thing that happens with the PEC pattern. It's actually quite easy to change. It explains a lot of pain that people have that's randomly, it's like, why is the pain there? And once the PEC pattern is gone to neutral, what we're left with is the left ARC pattern, so we start doing more asymmetrical kind of exercise to ease that. And what people notice when they do these exercises, they feel really relaxed after, because it gets the body out of a chronically stressed state. Affects the vagal tone. Lots of vagal tone goes up. That's always a good thing. You may find flexibility really increase. People with PEC patterns often feel very tight in the hamstrings because the pelvis is always rocked forward. So the hemis are trying to pull you out of that position. So they feel like they've got to stretch my hemis, and they say, no matter how much I stretch my hemis, they're still tight. My back's still sore. Or it helps for a few minutes or a few hours, and it goes back to being not so good again, nice and tight. So we need to get out of positions. So we need to put the body into certain positions that gets you out of the actual position the nervous system's in, and making the muscles fire a certain way. And we need to use breathing. Breathing is number one thing in the body. So the muscles do what the nervous system tells them to do. Nothing trumps the respiratory system though, and that includes panic responses and hormonal expression, neurotransmitter expression due to stress and trauma and stuff like that. I hope that helps.